So, I'm just going to put this out here. This is the wrong book. I'm not talking about that book.
I'm just going to put this out there. I'm not actually going to talk about that book. I lied to you all. I'm a liar. You know, like a liar.
Hello and welcome back. So as some of y'all probably know, I am also a journalist for the Left Hand Valley Courier out of Niwot, Colorado. If you keep up to date with my posts about my newspaper writing, you probably saw that I did a review of this book a few weeks ago, months ago. Time is weird, especially with COVID. Anyway, so this week I am talking about local Niwot veterinarian Patrick Kalenzi's book, Tears Run Dry. So, I'm actually kind of getting back to my New Year's resolution all those months ago with this book. That's when I said I'm going to read more nonfiction. I mean, I guess I technically followed through with that because I think this is my 4th or 5th nonfiction book this year as opposed to 2 maybe last year. Anyway, so this is a memoir of Kalenzi's, and it's very emotionally moving. So I actually got to interview Kalenzi, and he told me that he initially started working on the book kind of as a way to explain to his own children, I don't want to say like how easy they have it, because I feel like that's just kind of mean. Like, I don't want to make it sound like Kalenzi's doing the whole back in my day, children didn't have it easy type of deal. But like, when he was a child, he was growing up as a Rwandan refugee in Uganda. So there was colorism, there was ethnic bias, there was a lot of injustice that he had to grow up around. And so he wanted to try to explain some of that to his kids, just kind of contrast his formative years to theirs. But then he had some friends, he told me, who started reading the book and they're like, oh my gosh, this is such an amazing story, you should share it. So he ends up writing this book. It details his life. I think it's over the course of about 10, 20-ish years. It starts out when he's pretty young, and it's like his first time ever going to school. He's like somewhere between 7 and 9, I think. And he has to literally walk through this jungle to the little village school, and he has these bullies who make fun of him because they think they're better than he is because he's Rwandan and they're Ugandan. And it's kind of heartbreaking, to be perfectly honest with you, because you see this little boy and he wants to learn, and he wants to fit in, and he wants to do right by his father, but he also wants to like learn from his grandfather, and he has all of these conflicting wants, and he's just trying to balance them. And so and all under the setting of political unrest, because pretty early on in the book, actually, they talk about how a group of rebels, and I'm forgetting it's an ebook, so I don't have it in front of me that I can just like super easily reference, but how he like runs away and joins the rebel army for like 6 months or something, because he wants to free the Rwandan people, who are basically extremely oppressed in Uganda at the time, just because they're different and they're refugees and they're the lower of the Sorry, this is a really squeaky swing. They're like the lower of the Rwandan ethnicities. And so like that kind of little political conversation I thought was really interesting. So it goes from him starting at school to him being in the army, and then eventually he ends up going to school in the city with his half-brother, and that school doesn't have a very good rep, and he really wants to go to university. Like he just loves education. He loves learning. And it was really heartbreaking for me, and I think this kind of gets back to the whole point of him writing this for his sons initially, like saying, look what you have, because he could barely afford to go to school. Like, they didn't have public school, as far as I can tell, in Uganda in like the late 1970s, early to mid 1980s. Like, you had to pay to go to any school. And there's this one great part where he's talking to his brother John, and he's like, but what if they won't accept me? And his brother's like, look, dude, if you can pay the fees, you could be like mentally handicapped and they'd let you in. Like, they just care about the money. And sure enough, like, all the classrooms are like super overcrowded. There's not enough supplies. The teachers are so overworked that they have a really hard time caring. And Patrick, he wants to learn so badly, but it's just not the place for him. And he comes from a family of poor cattle farmers. So he doesn't have a whole lot of money as is, and then all of a sudden they don't have enough money. So, but somehow they find it. It's like this whole ordeal to try to get him through school. And there's so many different levels. And at one point, like, he ends up going to, I think it's North Uganda or maybe East Uganda. I don't remember exactly, but he goes on like a 10-hour train ride, like hitchhiking on a train, doing the whole like run after it, like jump on board, Dr. Zhivago style, like try not to fall under it, just so that he can get potatoes and other grocery items so that he can come back and peddle them on the streets in his city so that he can make his school fees. And it all culminates in a conversation he has with his father, or his grandfather, excuse me. And his grandfather's like this little old man, and he's like Patrick's idol, and his grandpa says to him, like, what do you want to study at university? And Patrick's like, oh, well, if I get in, I want to do something with science, like maybe I'll be an engineer or a pharmacist, you know, I don't know, but something with science. And his grandfather says, well, why don't you do something that I would understand? You know, we come from cattle herders. We've worked with animals all our life. And Patrick says, Baba, do you want me to be a veterinarian? And the grandpa's like, hey, only if you want. And he's like, oh my gosh, yes. So he actually ends up studying super hard, working his tail off, taking his tests, and he gets essentially a full ride government scholarship to go to university to become a veterinarian. And it's a very beautiful story, and it's just incredibly inspiring. It's a great read. I hope I didn't spoil too much of it. I feel like with memoirs, it's kind of one of those things where you either say not enough, and then you're like, well, what are they talking about? Or you kind of almost say too much. But really, I think this is a book worth reading. I think there are some uncomfortable parts, like, I mean, just the fact that he was essentially a child soldier for like 4 or 6 months, like, because he was afraid that he was going to die. I think it's one of those books that creates a really deep sense of empathy, because we hear about child soldiers, we hear about corrupt governments, but we don't necessarily see them. And so to see them through the eyes of someone who's just very kind and who just wants what's best for his family and to better himself, it just makes it that much more realistic, but also just like emotionally, I know I already said empathy, like it creates empathy, so I'm just trying to figure out a better way to rephrase that. Basically, I don't know if there is, but it's a really good book, and I definitely recommend it. It's available online. You can get it on Kindle Unlimited. Definitely recommend. He's an inspiring author. I really think that you're going to enjoy it. So that's all that I have for Tears Run Dry. I'm excited to announce that next week it's going to be my last book review of 2020. I'm not excited because it's my last book. I'm excited because it's Twitter friend Emma Kimball. I'm going to mess up the last name. It's like Mera? I'm sorry. But it's her book, Hypo Full of Love. I'm very excited to check it out and get back to you with my thoughts. I am taking next month off, I will definitely be on Twitter. I will try to put out some whip material, maybe some poetry or something. So definitely stick around. Please don't forget about me. But you don't have to forget about me yet, because you'll see me next week. So thanks.